What is up, geeks and geekettes? It's another edition of the Countdown City Geekcast. I've not said that in quite some time. My name is Ted, aka Steady. Joining me on this live stream, you know him as Retro Ray.
How's it going, man? Good to be back.
I'm gonna hide my hand because I got stung by a wasp like yesterday, so it's like twice the size of my other one right now. So it feels like kind of weird and stuff. But we're gonna get past that and tell you guys we got a great show for you guys. We're going to be talking all about Star Wars The Acolyte. Episode 3 just dropped yesterday, and we got plenty of other things to talk about that's all Star Wars related. Later on in the show, we'll also recap all the celebrity guests that have been announced for Superhero Comic Con. We are just over a week away from day one of Superhero Comic Con and can't wait for it to launch. If you haven't gotten tickets, please go get them right now, and we'll cover the most recent updates. But first, we have a very special guest to announce. He is just a massive Star Wars fan. He's a good friend of Michael Hawes, who owns Darkside Pizza Company that we covered a few months ago, that just opened in Bernie. And our guest is also the head of Star Wars Replicas. He's the one and only Gabriel Estrada. What's going on, Gabe?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And if anybody is curious on what kind of replicas you have, they can take a look at that beautiful collection you have sitting behind
Yeah,
you. It's just glorious and immaculate with all the lights and everything else, man.
appreciate that. Thank you.
You've had a pretty busy year so far. Helping your buddy Michael Hawes out with his pizza shop, opening it up, and everything else. And then recently, you joined the cast of Ahsoka at the For Your Consideration presentation. Tell us a little bit about that before we start talking about the Acolyte.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm good friends with Michael Hawes. We run a YouTube show called Collection Wars, where we talk about collections and just Star Wars in general. We were super excited for him to finally launch the restaurant. That was a really fun experience. Absolutely. The last month for me has been kind of crazy. Starting off with I got to hang out with Lawrence Noble, and I think that was like kind of the first thing, and I was like, this is insane. So Lawrence Noble, for anybody who doesn't know, is the sculptor of the Yoda that's outside of the Lucasfilm, the Presidio.
Yeah.
And so it's like a famous Yoda statue, and they have one at there's a bunch of them around Lucasfilm campuses and stuff. And I got to hang out with him, just be around him and just understand his process, and got to see some really cool stuff at the foundry that he was doing some of the bronze statues. So that kind of kicked it off. And then right after that, I was I have a TikTok account. It used to be called Star Wars Replicas. Now it's Empire Archived. I all of a sudden I got a notification, and the Star Wars account started following me. I was like, whoa, that's a big deal. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And the next notification I get is a message from the Star Wars account, and they're like, hey, we want to invite you and a guest to the red carpet premiere of The Acolyte. And I was like, what? That's just mind blowing. That's insane. So absolutely. So I went to that. And yeah, we could talk about that leading up to it. But then the following week, my friend, he's an animator for Family Guy and for American Dad.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah, he got invited to because he's part of the Academy. He got invited to one of those For Your Consideration events for the Ahsoka show, which he invited me as his guest, and got to see the panel with Dave Filoni, Hayden Christensen, Rosario Dawson, Natasha Lubrizzo, and Doug Chang, and then I slipped the composer for the Ahsoka score was up there too. But yeah, it was insane. Got to meet all of them afterwards in this like private meet and greet. and it was just mind blowing. So
That is
yeah.
amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah, and Acolyte, you saw the first two episodes. One of our team members on the network, the Kansas City Geeks Network, sort of did a recap because he was at a local premiere at
Yeah.
a one of those IMAX events. So he got a chance to recap the first two episodes for this channel.
Nice.
I had been so busy that I haven't been able to recap it. So we can kind of
Yeah.
talk a little bit about those leading into episode 3. If you haven't watched it yet, we're gonna be spoiling it. It's mostly all flashback stuff, so if you haven't seen it, you
Yeah.
don't want to get spoiled, you know go ahead and pause the stream right now, come back afterwards. But if you have seen it, we want to hear from you guys. Let us know what
Yeah.
your favorite parts were. What are the most interesting aspects of this story? Because they're really starting to unravel a lot of lore that's being introduced to the Star Wars universe for the first time. So
Yeah.
it's all interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to start off, and then we can ask you as well. I'll start off by saying these first two episodes. Are really interesting, and they sort of didn't exactly paint the picture I was anticipating based on the trailers.
Yeah.
When these trailers first came out, we were talking about, this mysterious assassin figure taking
Mhm.
out Jedi left and right. It seemed very Seven-esque, very
Yeah.
mystery noir. And I thought, wow, that's really captivating stuff.
Yeah.
So to my surprise, the mystery didn't last long. We see the face of the killer
Mm.
in the first episode,
Yeah.
and so that was like, okay. I expected the reveal to come a lot later.
Yeah.
So not to say that it's bad, but I was hoping kind of for that mystery type thing. Who's
Yeah.
pulling the strings? Who's taking them out? The why will come much later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then the why sort of came really quickly too. We kind of understand that there is this past event where the family of this assassin was perished in some sort of either
Mm.
tragedy or accident. And now we also know that there are twins, and that
Mhm.
is the core of the story.
Yeah.
These twins. In episode 3, we kind of go back in the past and hear more about them, and where they grew up, and who cared for them in the past.
Mhm.
My questions are not really questions. I had anticipated more of sort of the mystery aspect of this being really fleshed out. And it's not to say that it's bad or that I'm not enjoying what I'm watching.
Mhm.
But if you would have asked me, unless there's probably a good reason why they didn't do it the way I'm about to say.
Mhm.
But if we know that May and Osha are twins, if May is alive and we keep that revelation
Mhm.
later down the road, I kind of feel like that's more of a impactful twist.
Yeah.
Hey, this assassin that's been killing all these Jedi just so happens to be my long lost twin sister who I thought died tragically in a fire.
Yeah.
It seems almost too obvious of a plot line to not do it.
Yeah.
So I think the focus is going to be something different. If the plot twist of the twin sister being alive is not the focus, then there's got to be an even bigger focus, is all I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
so I'm going with it, and I'm gonna go along for the ride and
Mhm.
see what else they're gonna kind of push our
Yeah.
way. But Gabe, the first two
Yeah.
episodes, this is different than any other thing we've seen in Star Wars
Yeah.
history. So what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what's funny enough is that I've been invited on a couple other podcasts, and we were talking about the first two episodes before episode 3 came out, and I always would preface my opinion and saying, hey, mine's a little bit biased because I got to watch it on the big screen, and I think that makes a big difference. It really does.
I think so.
Cinematically, you're just like engulfed in it, and it's more captivating, in
Sure.
my opinion. But just talking about just generally. Oh, plus, obviously, I saw it at the premiere, so I was all hyped up about like seeing, like my mind was just like in another planet at that point. But kind of going back to what you were saying, about like the plot twist and all that stuff. So when I first, I told myself immediately that I was gonna go into this with zero expectations. And in fact, I told myself, I kept on like, I'm like, it's not a Star Wars show. It's not a Star Wars show. It's not a Star Wars show. I'm gonna watch it as a just normal sci-fi show, right? And the reason is early on with like Book of Boba Fett, I hyped myself up so much that my expectations were like through the roof, and it's just impossible for Lucasfilm or Star Wars to satisfy those those expectations. So I
Yeah.
was really disappointed with like the Book of Boba Fett. I was even disappointed with like the Kenobi series because again, my expectations were like through the roof. So this time around, I said, you know what? I'm not gonna do that to myself. I'm gonna watch it. It's obviously a different timeline.
Yep.
It's different characters that we've never heard of. There's no like stormtroopers or nothing. The only thing that's tying everything together are lightsabers, and really that's it, right? So that's my frame of thought. So watching the first two episodes, I had the exact same thought that you did. I said, whoa, like they revealed a lot, like in the first two episodes. You know what I mean? Like they gave away the killer. You're like, okay, now we know, and like we know the plot now, like I guess. And then we quickly find out, about the twins. And it really became one of those things like, well, what's the plot? Like, what are we following here? Like, it's no longer a murder mystery. Like, we know who
Right.
did it. We know why they're doing it. But I'm like, I mean, there has to be more to it. And I think in my mind, I was like, well, is it really about kind of the Sith, right? Or like the rise of the Sith? Or is it really about the downfall of the Jedi? And after watching this last episode, I think it's more about the Jedi than the rise of the Sith. But again, we'll have to see what happens. But at least the first two episodes, I was intrigued. I was happy with, the fight scenes were good. The cinematography was good. Again, they didn't give us enough storyline for me to say, oh, this is a great, this is going to be a great story, but it kept me captivated. It kept me in the story guessing, right? Which I think
Yep.
that's a good thing for
That
us
is a
to be
good thing.
like speculating on what exactly the plot line is. So, but I enjoyed the first two episodes. So
Yeah. And I didn't talk anything about what I liked. Lee Jung Jae. Besides Squid Game, I also saw a movie that he directed last year called Hunt, and that movie, which was completely in another language, subtitled, showed me the absolute massive range he has as an actor.
nice.
Because Squid Game, he's sort
Yeah.
of goofy, he's not,
Mhm.
very serious.
Right.
And then he went from that one to this movie. It was an espionage movie. It's a fantastic film
Okay.
called Hunt, and he's one of the leaders of this intelligence agency. Complete
Mhm.
polar opposites. I am a massive fan of this gentleman, and he is fantastic in this movie, this series.
Yeah.
He really grounds it. He brings a certain level of authenticity to the
Mhm.
Jedi.
Yeah.
It's just his timing, his delivery, his
Yeah.
mannerisms, his facial expressions. He's just a total package. If anybody wants to watch more of Lee Jung Jae's work, I highly recommend you do it. Starting off with Hunt, it's a very fast paced espionage movie based in the 80s. It's just really great. But I freaking love what he's doing in this series. And Carrie Ann Moss pretty much pulled out all the old Matrix maneuvers in that first episode. I'm
Yeah.
hoping for a big Carrie Ann Moss twist
Mm.
to happen later this season, but I'm not gonna hold my breath. But we'll kind of see what happens with that. Ray, you missed half of my talking points, but do you have any thoughts on episodes 1 or 2 before we jump into 3?
No, I mean they're great. I see. I like the characters of the Jedi. We see different aspects of them.
Mhm.
Soul's character. The Jedi's always talk about emotions and attachments, and for some apparent reason, when he first sees his child, it's like you could see something drew him to her,
Mhm.
and he just automatically gravitated to her
Yeah.
emotionally. And I think on top of what happens to her, he became more attached. But that's just what I took from the first two episodes.
Mhm.
But overall, I thought it was great. We're seeing, like, Gabe said, we're seeing that different world that we're in, unless you read the comics or the novels, you don't know much about. You get to see what these characters are.
Yeah.
And I feel we're gonna get that one-shot comic about the Wookiee, and I think we're gonna get some filler in there as well. But
Mhm.
overall, from these two episodes, I like what they're doing.
Mhm.
So I don't know, just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
I saw some online hate for Kelnaka today. I'm just like, bros. Somebody was criticizing his look. I'm like, you really got to pay attention to the details. The dude's got like
With
like
the
a mohawk
shave.
going. Yeah, he's got the fade going on. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is freaking awesome. All right, this dude's a gangster. That's what he is.
Yeah.
People need to leave him alone. Leave Kalnaka alone, folks. Star Wars Stuff Podcast is in the chat saying, "What's up, fellas? What's going on, Star Wars stuff?"
Going
What's up,
on.
man?
Oh
Yeah,
man,
that actually threw me off too. I know we're gonna get into that, but yeah,
sure.
I never realized that it's like shaven on the side until episode 3. I was like, oh, it's I guess it's shaved. I thought it was just like a little bun.
Yeah, no, I dig it. I'm just like, yeah, he's got to be different. And the Padawans always have the braid when they start off, so he
Yeah.
probably had maybe something similar, and now he's a master, so he's got the Qui-Gon bun going on. So yeah, no, I dig it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Episode 3, shall we? This episode we focus on Asha and May as children. They are in this coven of witches, and we start hearing kind of little bits and pieces about their upbringing and why they keep being referred to as special. Turns
Mhm.
out they don't have a father. They may have been immaculately conceived. There may have been some sort of dark magic, some sort of force abilities or
Mhm.
force manipulation used to create life. And these witches, this coven, which I don't think we have an official name. I was waiting for like an official name. I didn't hear one yet. So if somebody
Mhm.
else knows it, please tell me. But they also are force users.
Yeah.
They call it a thread, and their force abilities are very similar to Jedi, and they have sort of a very similar feel and a very similar way they describe the energy that they possess. And for some reason that we're starting to kind of find out, they don't feel very positive towards the Jedi.
Yeah.
Towards the end of this episode, Jedi show up, including Master Soul and Carry On Moss's character, Indara, and
Mhm.
they say there is some sort of republic rule of law that says you
Mhm.
cannot raise or train children in either mystic arts or maybe whatever they're doing. Not
Yeah.
100% clear, but
Right.
the Jedi are allowed, according to what they're saying in this episode, to also speak or test children to see if they might be potential candidates to join the Jedi Order, which
Mhm.
is interesting.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of folks, a lot of them are also vocal online saying, no, the order have rules and you can't do this and you can't do that. And kids got to be a certain age and this and that, and they can't have emotional attachments. I've heard all criticisms online. My
Mhm.
only thought to that is, when did that start?
Right. Maybe
Those
it started because of them, right?
We might be seeing the reason why they have all these rules right now, and
Yeah.
it's all gonna make sense later on, folks. Just hang in there, hang in there.
No.
Um, So this is all interesting stuff. Whenever I'm watching Star Wars, Marvel, DC shows, anything projects, I'm always trying to get sort of in the mind of the writer of the show, and I'm trying to determine like what's the big hit that's coming, what's the big
Right.
twist that's coming. I've always wanted to know where the Jedi prophecy came from. And I'm wondering
Hmm.
if we might see something similar towards the end of this series about the Jedi prophecy, if that's something that would have originated either around this time because of future events that might be coming down the road.
Maybe.
Jedi prophecy, of course, meaning there will one be someone who brings balance to the Force for necessary reasons. We'll
Hmm.
see what happens when that time comes. But I really want to know again because of Gabe, what you and I talked about. What are the biggest plots of this story moving forward? They're not 100% clear. In
Right.
this episode, episode 3, we're in a flashback the entire time. It
Hmm.
really raises more questions than answers anything else. We know that the coven was decimated by the end of this episode. May, for some odd, strange reason, decided to try and murder her sister by lighting this
Hmm.
facility that they're in on fire, with her still locked in it. And all of the witches of the coven are laying on the ground by the end of this. And we're maybe to assume that the Jedi are responsible, or maybe we're to assume that May is responsible, but it's ambiguous and that's intentional. And I think it's intentional. And if it's intentional, then I hope we get a solid um reason or a follow-up on what happens next. And it's got to be what's coming, because just like kind of writing 101, that's I feel like that's where the mystery is now. I thought
Yeah.
the mystery was who's killing people, and this twin sister is really alive, not dead. Those mysteries are gone and done with. So I'm trying to figure out what the next mystery is.
Yeah.
Um, Overall, episode 3, I'm intrigued. I think it does raise more questions than answers, and I hope that the payoff, after we get back to our present time, the payoff that's coming down the road is a satisfactory one. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Gabe, talk about episode 3, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Like you said, I think there's more questions than answers. Yeah, there's some stuff that I was like, okay, like let's. We really don't know if they're like their coven is like working on the like they're using the dark side of the force. You know what I mean? Or is it just like the force, right? It's just the force, and they're using it, and they're
Sure.
just using it in a different, just like in a, I guess, more spiritual way. um it was a little confusing, like why May was so upset, right? And I guess what I saw is that they're trying to create this duality, right? And I think the writers are trying to like make it clear, like one of them is it's splitting, and one of them's going towards the dark side, one of them's going towards the light side. So like they wanted to make it very clear, and one of them's really like upset, and the other one's like all like, but I just want to be a Jedi.
Yeah.
So just to make it very clear that they're kind of splitting apart. um I actually liked the witches and like that whole scene, and like how they're trying to kind of bring them into their I guess their coven, right? Like, and I think the one thing that I notice is that the girl with the horns, one of the moms, the one that kind of Darth Molly
Yeah.
looking girl. Um, so the one thing that that you could tell is that they're able to control people, right? You see
Right.
that when they control one of the Jedis, right? And she's like, all right, well, I'll let him go. So in my mind, when I was watching this whole thing and the way May reacted to her wanting to leave, it almost mirrored that mom's feeling, right? Because that one was like upset, like, no, we're not gonna let the Jedi do that. Like, how dare they? Like, they're all trying to calm her down. So in my mind, I was like, well, maybe she controlled May. she's like controlling May to try to
Ooh,
like set her on fire. And then later, once everyone's dead, you don't really see her dead on the floor. I mean, I tried looking, but she's
sure.
not there. So I'm thinking maybe that could be the plot twist where it's like, although that would be kind of obvious. I mean, I don't know, but maybe she's gonna be the Dark Lord that's controlling May, and she like taught her in those ways, and maybe it was a necessary thing to make May kind of just have that hatred towards the Jedi, right? So maybe it was actually the mom that killed all the witches and all the rest of them. Because so I was watching it with my wife at that time, and me and her will chat about it, and she was like, well, the Jedi came and killed them all. And I was like, well, why do you say that? She's like, well, because in the first episode, Mace tells them like, when what's her name, Carrie Ann Moss says like, we're not going to attack an unarmed person, and she's like, yeah, you do, right?
Hmm.
So in my mind, in her mind, actually, she was like, that means the Jedi attacked them, right? But we don't see May witness that. So I have a feeling the mom has something to do with it. I have a feeling that might be the plot twist, there. The other thing that I was, that I started like kind of thinking, I'm like, okay, well, if oh my god, what's with the good twin,
Asha.
Asha. I'm like, well, maybe Asha eventually like figures out, like later she learns that maybe it was the Jedi that did that to her family, and I'm like, maybe when she leaves the Order, she's the one training May, like, and she's the Dark Lord. But I'm like, I don't know if that makes sense, but you never know.
I know. I solid theories on both accounts, especially that first one, because that would make more sense to what I'm observing. Is
Mhm.
everything's really being left ambiguous?
Yeah.
They're totting a line here where they're not trying to pin it on one side or another,
Mhm.
and it's almost too obvious that they're trying to hide it. So yeah, something like that twist would be satisfying, and I hope
Mhm.
it's on that level, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ray, your thoughts on episode 3, man?
So I got to ask you guys.
Uh-oh.
So remember, the Jedi mind trick only works on the strong-minded.
Mhm.
This young Padawan, Torben,
Mhm.
how is the witch able to control him the way she
Mhm.
did? Is it because he was weak-minded? And
Mhm.
my theory is, what if, like you said, that mother saw, okay, this is the weak one out of the pack. Let
Mhm.
me take over him because we don't understand where the scar comes from.
Yeah.
What if she took over him, took control of him, and she's the one that made him kill the witches? And
Mhm.
mind you, this is all theory. I'm
Yeah.
just speculating. Now, she did that, and he got injured during the process, and
Mhm.
maybe that's where that happened. And like I said, this is all theory, just thinking out
Yeah.
loud. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? About how they were able to control a Padawan when Jedi are supposed to be strong-minded?
Yeah. Well, and I like that. The one thing that's like, because remember when he's like in the like floating,
Yes.
Meditation, yeah.
meditation, and she brings him down, and she's like, take this, and you'll get the forgiveness that you seek. And then he says, right, he's like, oh, like, I'm sorry, we thought we were doing the right thing. I I'm like, that's the hard part to understand, because
Yes.
I don't think he would think like slashing a group of witches would be doing the right thing, like by any Jedi ways. So maybe he means recruiting the little kid, into the Jedi Order. But yeah, it seems that, I mean, it's possible, but I don't see them making the Jedi actually like lightsaber all of them down, right? Um, I kind of, because you don't see any, like, you would make it very clear that there's like scorch marks
Yep.
or something, but they're just kind of all laying on top of each other. So, yeah, I don't know.
Torben is the piece of the puzzle that I can't fit into all this.
Yeah.
What is so horrific that a
Mhm.
Jedi who's supposed to be at one with oneself and at peace at all times to commit suicide, like just flat out
Yeah.
voluntary, no no second thoughts at all. He's
Mhm.
the piece of the puzzle that I cannot comprehend. And so it whatever the twist is, or whatever the reveal is, episodes down the road 6, 7, 8, it needs to make sure that Torben fits into the puzzle at that point. Because if
Yeah.
it's something along the lines of, oh, they mind controlled Torben into
Mhm.
murdering Jedi, or all the coven died at the hands of the mother who carried
Mhm.
Asha and May, but the Jedi weren't involved. If that is the case, why is Torben so? Why is he
Right.
so feel so guilty?
Yeah.
It almost would seem like they wouldn't take so much he wouldn't take so much responsibility if
Yeah.
he knew they were not directly at fault. It
Right.
must be something so
Yeah.
impactful that he feels so directly involved in that he would literally take his own life for it. He's the piece of the puzzle that I cannot fit into
Yeah.
the rest of the story so far. But I
Yeah.
hope that I really, really hope that
Yeah.
the rest of this story, they do reveal, why he feels so guilty.
Yeah,
I will.
because Soul, you could tell. Like we got that answer. Like you could see why he feels bad, right? And he tells her that, like, I'm sorry, I try to save you both, but like
Yep.
couldn't, right? So now I could see that because she just drops. But yeah, Torben is the one that's like kind of the missing key there.
I'm.
And in the witches too, if you think about it.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you watch Charmed, the power of three, they
Mhm.
kind of there's always two in the Sith, and then
Mhm.
in the kind of they talk about the group of how there's more power in a group more than
Mhm.
just two.
Yeah.
So it kind of like you mentioned before about the Sith, is it kind of this is where we get the power of two
Mhm.
type thing? I don't know. It's a bunch of
Yeah.
questions more that
Yeah.
popped up.
Yeah, definitely. I still think it's very intriguing. I think
Mhm.
that the questions that it raises are good ones, and I always said I'm going to appreciate the Acolyte, and I'm always going to stay with it because it's not tied to the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
The Skywalker saga, no matter
Mhm.
what project you're writing, it has to obey by
Right.
certain laws and dates, and you have to worry about continuity and all that stuff. Acolyte doesn't have to worry about that. Everything that we're getting is fresh. It's page one. It really does not need to continue into anything that we see or know in the future. It doesn't have to. If they choose to,
Yeah.
fantastic and great. But I
Yeah.
I do appreciate that we're getting so much new things, and even a coven
Yeah.
of force wielders, thread
Yeah.
wielders. It is quite intriguing, and it makes you wonder again. Like, well, there are definitely some extended lore of other groups and factions
Mhm.
that are force wielders, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. But I do want to know more about why the Jedi feel so inclined to seek out these children. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
hope that doesn't get lost. Why are they so special?
Yeah.
How exactly they came to be, and why the Jedi are so interested in them, because they
Yeah.
must have some other hidden agenda. I would it would be wild if it was just happenstance that they
Right.
stumbled upon these two twins in this remote planet they thought was uninhabited. So
Right. They
it's
had to.
so many questions. There are so many questions, and I hope they answer them all, because if they can answer them all, Well, then this show is going to be absolutely incredible. It's a big challenge. It is a
Yeah.
big challenge.
Yeah, I definitely had some, when as I was watching it, because we always remember that. Like, we know, obviously, there's Padawans, and we know that there's, they're somehow going to the Jedi Order, right? Whether that's the parents allowing them to go or them, it's maybe it's the law, right? Like they said, like they have to go. But that part did feel a little like I wasn't cool with it. I'm like, it made me feel a certain type of way against the Jedi. Like,
I
yo,
agree.
like, why are they going over here and stealing babies? Like, you know what I mean? Like that. And especially when Soul says, like, I joined when I was 4 years old. I'm like, I got little kids. I'm like, imagine that, like, them at 4 years old, you don't get to make that decision. Like, they're straight up taking them from the parent. And I know there's a lot of, like, discussion about that online, and there's a lot of kind of rumbling about about that thing, and then whether it's voluntary or not, because Anakin went kind of voluntarily, right?
Right.
But that definitely sat very, like, weird with me, yeah, as I guess as a parent, right? Like, to be like, well, and especially when Soul says there's thousands of them. I'm like, yo, like, they're taking thousands of these little kids away from, like, they're just going around looking for these force wielding little kids and basically taking away from their parents. It almost felt like, how the Empire for Bad Batch, like the last, right? Like, they're taking these little, like, force sensitive kids to, like, test them, and they're just kind of captive. I'm like, that's not too far off from what, at least the picture that I got, from this. But I get it, she wanted to go voluntarily, but it's still a little, it hit weird.
You're not wrong at all. And I think that we're sort of made to feel a certain way about their activities. Again, you say, why are they going around snatching kids? And I'm like, how far does their jurisdiction reach? They thought this planet was uninhabited, and they just
Yeah,
happened to find these
right.
twins, and they now must investigate. Again, I think there is some sort of hidden agenda that they're not willing to talk about. And I don't think it's going to paint the entire order in a
Mhm.
negative light. But yeah, we got to sometimes, we need to question authority. And the Jedi haven't always been truthful. I mean, Obi-Wan
Yeah.
never told Luke about anything that was going on. And, even
Right.
after he passed and all that. So, the Jedi sometimes do
Yeah.
weird things, and I think we could be witnessing a story that will maybe solidify who they're supposed to be by the end of this season, and not
Yeah. Well,
make misguided judgments or take certain actions because of tragedies they've might have inflicted on this coven or other
right.
people or other planets. And
And
they got to be more strict about what they're doing.
yeah. Yeah, and I definitely think, and again, we'll see with the twist. I definitely, when the Acolyte first started announcing, like I said, we thought maybe it was like, oh, it's the beginning of the Sith, but maybe this show is about the beginning to the end of the Jedi.
Mm.
Like, you're starting to see the politics, you're starting to see kind of that corruption, you're starting to see kind of some of these negative aspects of the Jedi, and maybe that's it. That's the beginning, because it's 100 years right prior to the prequels, which is the end of the Jedi. So maybe it's like an introduction of the beginning to the end. And I think especially, like, Star Wars in general, there's a lot of social context, and George Lucas has been very open about it. He's talked about, like, influences with, like, World War II, and, like, the world wars and politics and religion, obviously the Immaculate Child, right? There's a lot of aspects of social context and religion. And when you look at this series and you take that frame and of point of view, it kind of is like that, right? Because then you put the Jedi in a certain type of religious sect. And then there's obviously other different types of religion sects that still believe in this force, right?
Yeah.
But maybe they describe it a different way. I think just like normal religion, you know, in with us, right? It's like they all believe in some higher source, but how you get there and how you worship them and how you pull it is going to be different. So it was really interesting to kind of really see that it's like, wait, are the Jedi saying that their religion, their way of looking at the force is the correct way and everyone else's is wrong? That same thing could be said in like modern times with like, let's say Christianity going around and like, you know, saying that all the other religions are wrong, right? So
Right.
I loved, again, this episode. That's why I really enjoyed it more, because of that social, you know, concept of like, wait a second, who are the Jedi to dictate what the Force is and what, you know, how you use it? Just like no religion can dictate, you know, the higher source and how you do it. So again, that's the part that for me, I was like, all right, I could see this. This is cool, you know.
I'm glad
We
you
were
touched on
talking.
that because Ray was talking about that before we all joined here today, right, Ray?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I kind of perfect example. That's how I took it. I
Mhm.
took it as we're seeing, okay, the force is, kind of God
God, yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah. And so we get to see the different ways, like Christians, Catholics,
Mhm.
and, different religions, how they all
Mhm.
worship. It's almost the same thing,
Yeah.
but in their way.
Mhm.
And that's how I was seeing it as, and that's what I was
Mhm.
telling Ted. And yeah, you hit it, on the nail. It's like right there.
Yeah.
It's right in front of us. Like,
Yeah.
who's right or wrong?
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Who has claim? All have claim. It's one of my
Exactly.
favorite
Yeah.
lines from Kingdom of Heaven, Ridley Scott film.
Right.
Um,
And yeah, and so that's why a lot of the discourse that I've seen online about like, oh, like that's not the way the force works, and that's not, you know, there's specific rules about the force and how it's used. And I'm like, when you look at it at a bigger picture, man, we're talking about a whole universe of
Yep.
like planets and different ways, you know, and like with the episode 1 through 6, we just got this tiny little window into this universe, right? Very narrow characters, very narrow timeline, and there's like this whole entire universe out there. So I don't think there's such thing as like, this is the force and this is how it's used. Like, just like you can't say this is God and this is how you worship God. Like, no, man, like there's a bunch of religions, and at the end of the day, who knows who's right, you know? But they're allowed to think what they want, right? So, anyways,
Absolutely. Allowed to think
No.
what they want, allowed to believe what they want, and again, anybody who says like, no, this franchise or Star Wars only works a certain way. It's like that's why we're going so far back. Is to
yeah,
see how it might have been done differently. I mean,
yeah,
we got the prequels and realized like, oh, lightsaber battles can be even cooler. And
yeah,
nobody said like, no, you can't spin around that fast, or you can't, be too
no,
quick. You gotta do duels like Vader and Obi-Wan, slow and meticulous and stuff. It's like, no,
yeah,
things can be different. It could have been done a different way. And we're
yeah,
just kind of discovering other groups, other sects and
yeah,
covens that might have been not only using the Force, but
mhm,
doing things with it that the Jedi refuse to do. Let's be
mhm,
honest. The Force can be used for many different things, and the
yeah,
Jedi have very specific rules on what you're
mhm,
not allowed to do. It doesn't mean it can't be done.
right. Well,
So we're gonna see some more stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, think about it. Even just in recent Star Wars, like the whales, right? Like from Rebels, those are Force users, and you know, just because they're whales and they could, you know, hyperspace it, like you can't take that away from them. That they
Exactly.
use the Force. Or what's his name? Bandar
Oh, yes, I know you're talking about.
from Rebels. Remember that big
Yes,
rock
Yes.
looking guy? That's like,
Bendu.
he's Yeah,
Bendu.
Bendu, right? Yeah, he's like a force sensitive creature, and he's not a Jedi. Like he just uses the force in different ways. So I mean, we've already been introduced to different ways, so I don't see why this would be any different.
And
Yeah.
so you kind of it made me think right now. It's
Mhm.
kind of like when the Spaniards came to America, and the Aztecs were
Yep.
had their god the way they worshiped their god in the
Yeah.
Aztecs, and the Spaniards were like, "Who are you to be
Mhm.
doing this? That's not what you're supposed to be doing."
Yeah.
It's kind of the same way with the Jedi. That
Yeah.
Jedi, this is what you should be doing, not this.
Right.
It's kind of a perfect example, but just told differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's exciting. We're 3 episodes in. We got 5 more to go,
Yeah.
and was that right? Yeah, we got 5 more to go, and again, a lot of really good questions are being raised, and I think
Mhm.
it's a good thing in Star Wars lore to ask questions about like how does this work? It's
Right.
not this is not possible. It's okay, well, how does this work compared to what we've seen before? And if they can explain and they can come up with solid answers to those questions, then you're writing a great show. And so I hope that we get a lot of great answers for all the questions that Star Wars fans are raising. And I'm excited to see what happens next. There's still a lot in the trailers we have not seen. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. I really am. And like I mentioned, Lee Jung Jae is just fantastic. He's just so good in this role. I'm so happy for him. He's got to be stoked out of his mind that he's living this dream right now. So
Yeah.
yeah, excited. We want to hear from you guys out there. The Acolyte episodes 1 through 3. What are your thoughts on it so far? Give us your theories. Anything you agree with us on, anything you disagree with us on, drop your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to stick around every single week as we continue our discussion on the Acolyte. Gabe, man, I appreciate you joining us. Tell us what you got coming up, what you got going on, and where the people at home can find you. Talk about all your cool toys.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can follow me on social media, Star Wars Replicas, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. I just changed it to Empire Archive. I also do a weekly show called Collection Wars with Michael, who owns the Dark Side Pizza Co. And I will be in Texas, actually, in Dallas for Rebel Scum Con at the end of this week. I'll be there the whole time. I'm actually going to be doing a panel on that day, on the Sunday, talking about the Star Wars replicas and high end collectibles. So if anyone's around, everyone's going to Dallas for that convention, stop by and check it out. I'll have Michael Hawes will be with me. Nilda from Appetite for Collectibles will be on there, and Brandon from Talking Bay 94 will be joining me on that panel. And yeah, we're going to talk about high-end collectibles and high-end Star Wars replicas. So.
I love it. I love it. And if anybody's curious about who Michael is or what Dark Side Pizza Company is, that is a brand new pizzeria opening up that just opened outside San Antonio in Bernie. If you want more information, you can find them on Instagram at Dark Side Pizza Company. And if you want to see what it's all about, I have a TikTok video on the Countdown City Geeks TikTok channel, and that has almost surpassed 900,000 views because everybody and their mother wants to go visit this pizzeria in Bernie, Texas. So shout out to everybody who's left comments. Please ask questions. There's a lot of questions being asked. How far is it? What are the prices like? Is the food really good? What can we expect? Ask all the questions you want on the video. I'm more than happy to answer. And yes, the food is fantastic. It's
Yeah,
arguably the best barbecue chicken pizza I've ever had. I
pretty
told
good.
I told them that on the spot. I'm a
Oh yeah,
big fan of barbecue chicken pizza, and they
yeah,
they knocked it out of the park. It was probably my
yeah,
favorite ever.
yeah.
For anybody still watching, if you're not in the Dallas area going to Rebel Scum, come visit us next week in San Antonio for Superhero Comic Con 2024. We are excited. We are gearing up. We're going to have a booth on the ground giving away Funkos, prizes, as well as advanced screening tickets to some upcoming films. And if you're wondering who's going to be in attendance, who's not going to be in attendance, Diego Luna, Chris Pine, Jake Gyllenhaal, Orlando Bloom, Andy Serkis, and many, many more. If you're thinking right now, I don't got the money for it, this is going to break the bank, I know how these things work, I got you, fam. There are 10 guests where you can go and grab yourself a free autograph or a photo op. That includes Peter Weller, Sam Jones, Helen Slater, Star Wars lore Jedi Master Sam Witwer, and fantastic greats like Katie Lotz and Diane Guerrero. This event is one of the best organized events in the country. We've been a part of it since the beginning, and we will also be hosting like half the panels this not this weekend, next weekend in San Antonio. So if you have any more questions, uh, hit them up on Facebook or social media. You can also ask us if you have any questions, and don't forget to come visit us at our booth, Kansas City Geeks, on the expo floor, right next to the uh, panel stage is where we'll be on the expo floor. So yeah, we're very excited, and it's going to be fantastic. We're gonna have to get you down here, Gabe, for one of these events.
Yeah, man. Oh, Diego Luna. I gotta. That's that. He's on my bucket list, man. I gotta meet him. I haven't met him yet, so
You might have to extend that Texas trip, man.
I know, right? I'm gonna have to go week early, man. Yeah, I think Michael. I think he mentioned he might be going to that convention. So,
Bring some pizzas.
there you go.
Gabe, we want to thank you again, brother, for joining us tonight. Wonderful discussion. I love the theories. I love talking theories with massive Star Wars fans, and it seems like we're all in agreement that they're doing some really interesting things with this show, and all it takes is for them to kind of, stick the landing, and we're all going to be pretty happy with the end result. So if you haven't already, follow Gabe at Star Wars Replicas or follow him on TikTok at Empire Archives. And appreciate you once again, sir, for hanging out with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. That'll do it for us. For the Geekcast, my name is Ted, aka Steady, and joining me on this live stream, of course, the one and only Retro Ray.
Peace, guys.
We will talk to you guys next week, and we'll also be doing some lives from Superhero Comic Con. Stay tuned, folks. It's going to be